Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be doing a care video on the crested gecko. So be sure to give it a watch and see what you think. Here we go. Right guys, let's start the video with the scientific name for these guys, which is called the Creolophus ciliatus. Probably butchered that a little bit, but that is the best you were going to get from me on that. Now these guys come from New Caledonia, which is close to Australia and New Zealand, with the adults size being 6 to 10 inches roughly, with a lifespan of 15 to 20 years. These are omnivores, and their other names are called eyelash geckos. Crested geckos come from a humid, warm environment, so will need some extra heating here in the UK, but will all depend on where you're from in the world. A tall glass vivarium is best suggested with a top ventilation like my Exoterra that you can see here, and they only need a basking area of around 24C, which is about 75F, and can become very stressed if they get too hot or even die from getting overheated, so I'd always recommend to use these with a thermostat when using a heat mat or a basking bulb. Crested geckos love to climb and will very rarely spend time on the floor, so you'll need to make sure that they can reach the top of their enclosure, but make sure things such as logs, branches and other decorations are placed in a very firmly position to prevent injury and or death. There are two main reasons to ensure that there are lots of real or fake plants in the vivarium. Firstly, so they can hide if they want to and if they feel safer that way. Secondly, they maintain their hydration from water droplets that come off the artificial plants or the real plants when you spray the vivarium on a daily basis. This is really important, but I would still suggest a small water bowl on the bottom just to be safe with any reptile like you should. Next we're going to move on to cleaning, which is pretty easy and straightforward for a reptile. A spot clean is suggested every 5 to 7 days, and a deep clean is suggested at least once a month. But if it's a bioactive setup, this may vary depending on how well your cleanup crew do on your vivarium and the amount of waste that your gecko is producing. Next we're going to move on to your crested gecko's diet. Crested geckos are omnivores, meaning that they'll eat fruit, live insects and vegetation. Brown crickets are the most popular when it comes to live insects, but you can also use alternative live insects such as locusts. As treats, you can use waxworms, calciworms or mealworms. Mealworms are suggested to mature geckos only, which is 18 months or older, as they can be difficult to digest from time to time. And this can cause underlying health issues when the gecko is fully matured, so to prevent this it would be as a treat and only as a treat. Fruit and veg are given in powder mixed diets, such as Rapashi or Pangea being the two most popular, but Exoterra also do their own brand as well. Here you can see Rolo eating Pangea, which is watermelon flavour, but also eats things like the Rapashi as well, which is a mango flavour. They can be fed 3 to 4 times a week, alongside live crickets or locusts. But when feeding live insects, you should always make sure that they are dusted in the correct supplements, like calcium powder. If you don't do this, then your gecko will get something called metabolic bone disease, where they're not getting the correct amount of calcium into their body to make their bones strong, which is equivalent to a human not being in the sunlight. This is really important for your crested gecko to maintain a happy and healthy lifestyle, so if you don't do this, make sure that you start doing it, and you'll save your gecko a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. So then they can tuck into their Pangea just like Rolo is here. Next, we're going to move on to handleability of your crested gecko. Crested geckos are quite a social animal and enjoy coming out, but they also enjoy spending time in their vivarium and doing nothing, so you don't always want to be getting them out and irritating them. But when they do come out, you have to be careful because them, as well as many other lizard species, are prone for dropping their tail. Crested geckos are prone for dropping their tail extremely easily compared to other lizards, so would not always be the best suggested handling for a kid, as they're a little bit rougher than us as adults. But it can still happen to you as an adult. If you do happen to you, don't be alarmed because they drop them in some of the silliest scenarios. But if your crested gecko has his tail, then it's a good sign. As you can see here, they are also keen jumpers as well, so if there is a little kid handling them, make sure that they're on a surface which is low to the ground in case they do jump. This will prevent injury in the long term. So same goes for adults. Make sure you do not have it high up, because if they see something they want to go to, they will jump. When it comes to humidity, crested geckos like to have at least 50%, but preferably 70%. If you're struggling to get this up in your vivarium, try adding sphagnum moss like you can see at the bottom of mine here. This will help when you spray the enclosure to make it more misted and more humid, which will eventually get the humidity up and make your gecko healthier and happier. With your crested gecko's food, it is suggested that you change it every 24 hours to prevent it from going mouldy. Also, with the leaves, real or artificial, you should make sure that they're pushed into the corners of the tanks. This allows your gecko to get up in the corners like you can see here and make him feel safe and covered. Also, it will help with the droplets that he can lick off and keep him hydrated. Now, as we said earlier, it's always important to have a small water bowl just like this in the bottom of the vivarium. Yes, you might think it's silly because you'll never see him at the bottom and it will dry up on a regular basis, but you'll never know when your gecko needs a drink. Next, we're going to move on to heat in the vivarium. The best way to maintain the heat is to stick a heat mat on the outside of the tank, especially if it's glass, and up high instead of down low or in the middle. This is going to help heat the vivarium and not injure your gecko from having the heat mat on the inside of the tank. Next, we're going to move on to UVB. UVB used to be seen as a personal preference, but now it is seen as a must, as it has been tested and proven that there is many health benefits it can provide for your crested gecko. A 5 to 7% UVB is suggested depending on its full coverage or partially covered. Also remember, if the tank is a mesh lid, you will lose some UVB through the mesh. We use a T5 7% shade dweller by Arcadia. So we monitor this using the Exoterra digital probe and a Habitat to maintain a safe and happy environment for the crested gecko and any other reptile that you will need to have in the future. Right guys, that is this week's video done on the Crested Gecko Care Guide. If you have any questions at all or anything like that, then pop them in the comments and I'll be sure to respond to every single one of them. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next video. Goodbye.